What's going on, guys? It's your boy. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about Ironheart. The entire show is officially out, so I do want to go ahead and issue a spoiler warning for anybody who hasn't seen it. We're going to be doing a review of the entire show. I personally really liked the show. I think that the latter half had a lot of really interesting things that are very interesting to talk about, and I'm really excited to dive straight into this. So without any further ado, let's head into this, shall we? Bum, 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 bum. Marvel Monday! Bum, 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 bum. Okay, so I do want to go ahead and say I'm going to try to keep this review very brief because I actually mostly want to talk about where we might go from here, because I think Ironheart was a really interesting character, and the fact that this movie was released about 3 years after it originally filmed and it began production, and from my understanding, I don't think they did any reshoots. Like, they 100% knew what they were doing with the show, and they just let it go out as is, and they left a lot of things setting up for future stuff, and I'm really intrigued to see where the show might potentially lead. So for starters, we're going to do a review. I really liked the first couple of episodes. I think that the episode 3 through 5 is without a doubt like the best stretch of this film. I think that it's absolutely fantastic. Sorry I keep calling it a film. I usually talk about movies and not TV shows. That's my bad, my apologies. But episode 3 through episode 5, absolutely fantastic. I think that everything that they do with Parker Robbins, the Hood, is incredible. I think that Anthony Ramos, incredibly charismatic. I think that he just has so much energy to him, and the amount of times where he's like sitting down at a table with somebody trying to convince them, hey, you should join my team, you should join my side, is really cool. And I kind of like the way that that parallels the character that we find out he made a deal with later in the movie, and I think that's really interesting. I love the way that his powers look. I like the way that his bullets are very interesting, and something else that I kind of like about this character, which they kind of ruin in the 6th episode, is he's very interesting when you know very little about him. And so that mystery and that intrigue of like, okay, well, he can turn invisible, these guns, how do they work, we're not entirely sure, he's just a very powerful person. That's sick, and I think that it works really well. And so for the most part, I really liked this character. I'm a huge fan of Anthony Ramos, though. You put him in anything, I'm probably gonna like it. And so I really like episode 4, which is where we start off the new episodes that got released. Ezekiel Sims is thrown under the bus for things that Riri Williams did. He's going to be in jail. He's arrested. He's currently waiting in a jail cell. And Parker Robbins comes up to him and is giving him this opportunity to kind of get revenge on Riri and join his team as a new tech person. And they break him out of jail. I think that that's incredibly fun. Once again, Anthony Ramos, super charismatic when he's talking about him. Like, hey, right now you're a nobody, but you can be a somebody. And you don't have to change who you are. You don't have to have a fake name. You can be Ezekiel Stain. That's okay. And so I absolutely love that. I think that that's a really fun dynamic. Once again, Alden Ehrenreich is absolutely phenomenal in this show. I think that he's really good. And I think that he works very well as a villain when it's just him fighting against Riri outside of the White House, which, by the way, I said White House, White Castle. My bad. But whenever we have those fight sequences, I think that it's a lot of fun. I think that there's a really interesting dynamic with that. And for the most part, I think that him potentially being a big bad of a future team, like a Young Avengers team or something like that, would be really cool. I also think him being a tech billionaire who could potentially be somebody behind the scenes would also be really cool. So I like everything that they set up with him, and I low-key hope that he does stick around and we potentially see him again, because Alden Ehrenreich is an incredible actor. And the fact that they were able to get him in this show is fantastic. And the fact that he's potentially going to be able to move forward and do more in this show is really interesting. And I do think it's something really unique about this show. And the main reason why I want to talk about the future, they kind of set up 3 villain characters who none of them die in this. They all kind of have a future that they could potentially be in the MCU. And I think that that's awesome. Like, I think that that's really great. So to kind of wrap up my thoughts about the show overall as a whole, I like the fact that this movie kind of parallels the Hawkeye TV show, with the fact that in Hawkeye, we follow Kate Bishop getting in way over her head, joining fights against the tracksuit mafia, and just fighting against a bunch of gangs and criminal underworld stuff that she has no idea what she's getting herself into. I like the fact that she kind of gets herself caught up in a web in a little bit, and potentially is going to be facing off against Kingpin. But the reason why she ends up being okay, and the reason why she ends up being successful throughout this film, not that I think she wouldn't, like, I don't want to by any means be like, a woman couldn't survive on her own, but she ends up getting trained by Hawkeye. She gets an Avenger who ends up helping her out. He's in her corner. He's kind of training her a little bit, and he's teaching her kind of the ways of being a superhero and being a Hawkeye specifically. And I think that that's really cool. They have this really fun dynamic and banter, and they work well together. And Ironheart's almost like, what if in that show she didn't have Hawkeye? She's constantly getting in over her head. She's constantly trying to make like promises that she can't keep. She's constantly trying to do whatever she can to protect the people closest to her. And she's constantly just making things worse because she doesn't know what she's doing. And that's kind of what Ironheart is. Ironheart is getting up with gang activity, something that she really probably should not be getting involved with, but she doesn't have anybody like Hawkeye to be like, hey, maybe you should take a step back and not do that. She doesn't have anybody to turn to. She's completely by herself, and because of that, she's constantly making things worse. She's constantly making mistakes, and she's somebody who thinks she's an absolute genius, and that's dangerous. When you think that you are like the smartest person in the room no matter what, and you have this confidence to you, you tend to get a level of arrogance. And I think that she has that arrogance right now, and it's something that even through the end of the show, I think that she's really biting off more than she can chew. And I know that they have that line in the show where they're like, you're biting off more than you can chew, and she's like, I can chew a lot. I think that right now she's constantly getting in over her head, and it's going to come back to potentially bite her. And I really like the fact that this feels like it could have been set up for another season of a TV show. And I understand Ironheart's probably a really expensive show to produce, so they're probably not going to be doing that. But I genuinely do think I would like a season 2 of this. Like, this is genuinely a really solid TV show. It felt very episodic. I like, for the most part, the characters in here. I think that all the secondary characters are also really interesting. And overall, I like the fact that she's somebody who's not really winning a lot, and she's constantly making a lot of mistakes. And it really does feel like how in Daredevil Born Again, the end of that season was like really them at a very low point, and now he's gonna clearly rise up in the next season. It feels like this show should have had a season 2 where she kind of like rises up and potentially needs to face against Zeke Stain and have like a really cool epic final clash. And I will say that's one thing that the show, in my opinion, is lacking though. Fight sequences, not that incredible. I think that they're all very short-lived, and she's fighting against the Hood, who is somebody who can't fly or do anything like that. And it does kind of make sense that like a lot of these action sequences are very short, and Iron Man fight sequences inside of a building, which pretty much all of her fight sequences are inside of a building, are very lackluster. That being said, all the stuff inside of the White Castle with her without a suit fighting against a bunch of other people, that's pretty fun. It does a good job of showcasing that she is actually a genius and she's good at quick thinking, like on her feet. That's cool. I like that. But overall, this show is a bit of a mess, but it's a fun mess, and I think that it's really cool. And it introduces us to 2 really cool characters. Zelma, I was very excited to see her. I think that she was absolutely fantastic in this, and I really hope that she does more in this movie, because I'm in the future of the MCU, because I love the whole like mystical arts side of the MCU. I think that everything with Kamar-Taj is really cool. I like the fact that when Doctor Strange, first showed up, there were other characters who kind of had a general idea that like, hey, you can go to this place and you can learn, magic stuff. And this being a character who, like a lot of teenagers, very similar to Billy in Agatha All Along, just kind of like knows, hey, I can learn magic. I can teach myself how to do some of this stuff. And her being a self-taught magic person is really interesting. And I think the fact that she's kind of dealing with different things in different realms is really cool. And I think in a lot of ways, she really is how I feel like America Chavez potentially should have been in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Just a young character who wields magic and is kind of a mess with it. I could definitely see her being a bigger role. And I think that actress who they casted to play her is fantastic. So I'm not going to dive super far into that, but I'm excited that they introduced her. For the love of God, if you guys do a Young Avengers, Strange Academy, anything like that, please include her, because I think that she's fantastic, and she has a lot of a different enough power set that would be really useful with a Young Avengers team. That being said, I really like that. And then obviously you gotta talk about the big one. Mephisto is officially in the MCU. Does that mean we're finally getting Ghost Rider? I've seen a lot of people theorizing that the character Cousin John is going to be Johnny Blaze and he is going to be a Ghost Rider. I think that would be sick. But that being said, the fact that Mephisto is in the MCU now and is played by Sacha Baron Cohen, who arguably is probably the biggest name actor on the show, that's pretty sick. I think that's really cool, and I definitely think that they set the groundwork for him potentially to be a bigger deal. And I also could see a world where Mephisto ends up being like the big bad of a Midnight Suns movie, and because Riri Williams has made a deal with the devil, she has to show up in that. I think that'd be really interesting. But yeah, overall, I'm really liking the stuff that they did at the end of this show, and I like the fact that she made a deal with the devil, because from my understanding, I think she thinks she can outsmart him. Like, I genuinely do think that part of the reason why she shook her hand with him and she's, you know, making this agreement with him is because she still thinks she's like the smartest person in the room. And I think that somehow, some way, she's going to try to outsmart him. And I think that that'd be really interesting. So that being said, that's pretty much the majority of my thoughts. Where do I see things going forward from this show? I really want Ezekiel Stain to be a villain of a Young Avengers movie or TV show or anything. Please, for the love of God, make it happen. It'd be really, really cool. I think that Riri Williams potentially teaming up with people like Kate Bishop would be awesome. Like I said, Zelma was really interesting in this. I like the actors who's playing her. If they could somehow include her, that would be awesome. And so overall, I'm really enjoying this show. I think it's going to be fantastic if they were to do a season 2. And I really like the Riri character. I actually don't have a lot to say about the future of this. Kind of rambled there. But yeah, that being said, that was pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about in this video. I love and appreciate you guys so much for coming by and checking it out. I hope you guys have an incredible, incredible day. And if you liked it, feel free to like and subscribe. I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one. Peace out. Bow, bow, bow.